Things from the Oral History broadcast again. I'm Ray Mofield, and we're on WCBL as usual each Monday. Today we're talking to a Marshall County, maybe we ought to say a former Marshall County, but he's lived where he could spit in the county most of the time, and that's my friend Padgett. I started to give his whole name, but I thought he might shoot me. So I'll just say Tom Padgett. That's what everybody knows him by. Tom, thanks for coming by.
Well, glad to be here, Ray.
Your father was...
Clarence Padgett.
Clarence Padgett was always a good friend of my dad's. I used to hear Dad talk about him so much in their younger days. And your mother was...
Janella Dunn.
And Janella Dunn, the famous Dunn family. Let's see, is D.Y. still living?
D.Y. still living, 96 years old.
Mm-hmm. He has been a great educator and member of the Army Reserve, I guess it was, and he did.
I think he held a record on that in the length of time he was in it.
I believe that's correct. And your mother, of course, married Clarence Padgett, and after Clarence died, some years later, she married
Norman Lawrence.
Norman Lawrence. Well, I knew some of the people in both of those families, maybe all of them. And in fact, when we finally stopped moving around so much and moved out onto Mr. Booker's farm on the Wadesboro Road, we were fairly close neighbors.
Yeah, just 2 or 3 houses.
Yeah.
On Wadesboro Avenue, we called it in those days. Now then it's Tucker Road, but we knew it as Wadesboro.
Yeah. Now, did you remember any of your grandparents, Tom?
Yeah, I remember both. Well, I never saw my grandfather Padgett. He died before I was born, but my grandmother Padgett lived to be 96 years old. She was Lauren Whitnell.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Whitnells around Murray.
Oh, yes.
And Grandpa Padgett was John Foster Padgett. Grandfather Dunn was John Craig Dunn, and grandmother Dunn was Sally Jingles Dunn.
Mm-hmm. Now, Clarence Padgett, I believe, originally came from out in the Olive area.
Yeah, that way out east of Hardin.
Because he and Dad grew up together, and Dad was from Olive, so that I'm making an assumption there. We had a Padgett here from, let me think, it was either Carlisle County or maybe Hickman Fulton is down in that area, got his master's degree here. And it seems to me that his father was a judge.
Yeah, but they're not any of our kin folks. The only kin folks Padgett I have is 2 cousins at Lone Oak, John Bob and Marvin.
Mm-hmm.
Those are who I've heard of, and I met the judge once and talked to him, but we weren't any kin to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. You were born in the Hardin area,
Yeah, on Wadesboro Road there.
Right there.
Yeah, in Hardin.
Well, actually, I was born on the other side of town, out inside of Barnett Cemetery, so we didn't get together until later years. But being born there, I presume you went to Hardin School.
Went to Hardin for graduate. All the place I ever went was to Hardin.
Started in the 1st grade.
Started in the 1st grade.
Well, Hardin School began in 1891 when Hardin Irving moved his store down there, and it grew up, got a little population rather rapidly with the coming of the railroad in 1890. And then they were, I guess, the first year a one-room country school. And later they got big ambitions, and the town grew so fast that in 1910 they built a big brick building, which became a high school 2 years later in 1912. Now, of course, you weren't around then.
No.
But the old building, I guess, was there when you started school.
Yeah, it was. I remember when it burnt.
Mm-hmm.
We helped work on that, clean brick when they built the other schools. Yeah. Finally, it also burnt later.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, me and John both worked on that.
Yeah, I remember that cleaning up from the first burn, which occurred in, if I remember correctly, in February 1937, and then about the rest of the year and a good part of 38, we kept working on that place.
We went to school in the churches around.
Mm-hmm. I know the county had said, well, we can't build the building, but if you want to put it back, we'll staff it with teachers. And that's when Hardin became a county school instead of a city school. And I remember Mother giving some chickens to...
Yeah, they had all kinds of donations to help build.
Didn't Ed Gardner run a produce house there?
Yeah, he'd run the produce house.
We'd take chickens and eggs and sell a little cream down there somewhere. I forgot now who tested the cream.
Well, Clyde Youngblood's grocery on the corner where the post office is now. Well, it was one place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess the other stores did too. I don't think Davenport's or Pace's ever did any cream testing.
No, I don't believe they did. I can just faintly remember that about where the post office is now, there was a little building there, and somebody tested cream in that place, but for the life of me, I can't remember who it was. And it seems to me that at one time, Cratus Edwards had a barber shop right along in there.
It's right across the street.
It was across the street?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
About where City Hall is now.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I met a guy the other day at the restaurant. I don't know if I was originally from Hardin. I told him was, and said he cut hair there 50 years ago, Mac Waters, but I didn't remember him, but some of the Boris Utley and John L. Norwood both remembered him.
I can't remember exactly what was on that corner where the grocery is now.
Well,
but I do know my mother's cousin was a doctor, Irvin Hughes.
Dr. Hughes had an office upstairs.
That is upstairs, wasn't it? You went up a little stair.
Monroe Wilson run a grocery there in the pool room.
That's Joe Hart's dad.
Yeah. One guy come in there and put a funeral home, but I don't think he ever had a patient, or I don't know whether you wouldn't say patient, ever had a customer.
He didn't have any business, so he had to leave,
Yeah.
I guess. I heard my dad say, I believe, that back when he was a kid, and of course he was born in 1891, a year after Hardin was first founded. And somewhere along in there at one time, I believe there was a dime store and maybe a movie theater.
Well, Toby showed pictures, Toby Clark,
Uh-huh.
but I don't, whether they call that a theater or not, I don't remember any dime store. I remember the grocery store being there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Mr. Faircloth having a livery stable down there by the Hardin Baptist Church, just nearly across from it. A lot of people don't remember that, but I remember it well.
No. Well, of course, we didn't, much of my growing up years was spent over in Callaway County, Wadesboro and various places. And
They used to have 2 and 3 blacksmith shops and shoe a lot of horses on Saturday evening. That was a big show. Every once in a while they get a hold of a wild, and all of us boys watch them.
at various times, and I can't give you the years or tell you whether they were all there at the same time or not, but I can remember one time a blacksmith shop owned by a man named Solon Griffin.
Yeah.
And Les Jackson.
Claude McDonald.
Yeah, Claude McDonald. And, of course, the Pace brothers.
Yeah, Houston Reddick had one.
They were about the last that's there, I guess.
Mr. Smith had one over there in the Horsewarren store. Notley or something, Smith.
Some way I don't remember that, but I can recall those others. Well, let's get back. Who was your first teacher?
Maddie Elkins. Remember her well.
Uh-huh.
Fluke Elkins, his daughter, Maddie.
And what was your favorite subject in school, Tom?
Basketball, I think. Recess and basketball.
Yeah. Well, now you played on the famous 1941 club.
Yeah, I was a substitute on that. I was a member of the team. They liked to run out when we went to state tournament, and a bunch of them got the measles.
Yeah, that's always one of those famous ifs. Yeah. If that hadn't happened, I feel fairly sure Hardin would have been state champions.
Yeah. Billy Irvin and Lewis Thompson never did even get to the state. They both had the measles and left them in Orangeburg, afraid we'd get quarantined if they went.
Uh-huh.
I stayed with Harold Emmon. He was my roommate, and he had them. He had a temperature about 103 and 4.
But you didn't tell it.
Didn't tell it.
Well, they did, I believe the season finished, and they'd lost only one game.
They just lost one and all. That was to Inez in semifinals by 1 point. They hadn't lost any until then.
And they won. They still played a consolation. They played Lexington, Henry Clay.
Yeah.
And won that game.
They won that one.
They were finished in 3rd place, which, of course, is a good record. But it would have been a lot better to have seen Hardin out there as number 1, which I think they deserve. Now, your brother John made the All-State, as I recall.
John and Tom Trimble.
Tom Trimble.
Yeah.
And let's see, John is in Frankfurt still?
He's in Frankfurt in the education department with the state. He works for...
He's been up there 25, 30 years, hasn't he?
About 25, I guess. He's about ready to retire.
Okay. Well, we better get back to grade school. Some of your other teachers, do you remember any of them?
Well, Miss Roberta Cox, Miss Melody McGowan, Miss Cole, Miss Herman Cole, Beatrice Jones. That was in grade school. In high school had Carl Johnson, Herman Cole, Junior Duke, Alton Ross. That's about all I can think of.
Well, now, several of those, let's see, when I came back to Hardin as a sophomore in the school year of 37, 38, and then finished there, I'd gone to New Concord my first year. You were, I guess, a freshman that year, weren't you?
Yeah.
No, maybe you started the next year. I forgot. What? You graduated in class 42?
42, yeah.
So I was in the class in 1940, so I missed.
Oh yeah, Grundy Holland was a teacher too.
Uh-huh.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, Mr. Holland was the principal when I started back to Hardin.
Yeah.
And a very fine person. I remember one thing he did was buy a typewriter. I said one time I'd sure like to take typing, and he said, well, if you'll take it, said, you know, it's pretty much a self-taught subject, said, I'll buy a new typewriter. And he bought a new Royal. I don't know, I don't know now what it cost, but I guess it's $100 or so, which sound like $1 million to me. Remember that he got a new super deluxe 39 Ford. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And seemed like Robert wrecked it.
Yeah, they come down off that Harrison Hill before they blacktopped that road, and
hit loose gravel.
Him and Julian Warren, they always thought Julian got over the emergency brake and he got loose gravel, but anyway, they put her in the ditch upside down. Brand new.
I thought that was the most beautiful car I'd ever seen in my lifetime.
I think they run them all the way from the wreck to Hardin to tell them about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see.
I remember going with Daddy in 1929, this building the highway, which is old 641 now, and that was in 29, and one guy said, this biggest bridge I ever saw, said there never will be a vehicle to use this. Now there's about one lane, it's a small.
Yeah. Oh, well, the cars have gotten a lot wider, and certainly the trucks have.
Yeah.
Have gotten, well, I can remember things about Hardin. You talked about Davenport's store. Now, that was the one that is near the train station.
Yeah.
And
They had a drawing every Saturday evening, give away a sack of flour and sugar and so forth, and a big crowd there, big crowds. Paces also, they had a drawing done the same thing. Another thing I remember real good was a Doodlebug train coming at 5 o'clock.
Well, tell me, what was the Doodlebug?
It was just a mail train, a passenger train, but Mr. Utley and Mr. Johnson worked on his mail clerks. Miss Utley always, and well, Mr. Johnson too, they had a basket lunch there for them. And the whole Hardin turned out. I reckon everybody went home and went to bed after 5 o'clock. Daddy and them, before he died, they went every evening to meet that train at 5 o'clock, the doodle bug, they called it.
Dad used to tell a story about whether this happened or whether he just made it up, I don't know, but he said that there was a man riding on the train and he heard the conductor call out Hardin. And he said to the conductor, how big is Hardin? What's population? And the guy said, well, I don't really know, but you can count them, said they'll all meet the train.
That's about right. There used to be big crowds to see that, and on Saturday evening too, especially they had a baseball game there on Saturday afternoon, people on horses and down in the woods, and large crowd. In fact, they couldn't even hardly get around third base. Somebody hit one down Raymond Scroggin's front yard and tried to make a home run while everybody was meeting him at third base.
Yeah. Well, I remember some of those, I guess, later years when they were playing there. Clay Darnell, of course, played.
Yeah.
He was, he could swing a bat, he sort of easy-like, and yet sometimes it'd wind up in the schoolyard,
Yeah.
Or the school building. Do you remember Bill Miller, who was superintendent of schools in Callaway County?
Yeah, I knew Bill well, him and his father too, Bernie.
He played there or
Yeah.
something, didn't
Yeah, he could throw it like a bullet, but he was wild. His daddy was left-handed. He just lobbed it up there just like he couldn't miss it but it was hard to hit because Bill been throwing it so hard, it was off speed then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see, I saw a fella Saturday night here in Murray, and let's see, what was his name? He's a big, kind of red-headed fella, and then he used to pitch.
Red Willoughby?
Willoughby, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Did he run an auto parts place in later years?
Yeah, he did.
He was a right good pitcher.
Yeah, he was. He's real good. He was left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
He had a mean curveball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see Red pretty often. In fact, I've saw him a couple times the last 2 weeks.
Now, you were talking about Byron Johnson and Jess Utley. You really got good mail service in a way when they put the mail on there and then they sorted it before they got to the next town.
Yeah.
And
Mr. Putman had that little two-wheel doer. They wheeled it from the railroad to the station to the post office.
Mhm.
Everybody followed him, see if they had a check or something.
Yes. Well, that reminds me, Saturday I was in Metropolis, Illinois for an SIU meeting, and a man and a woman were eating at a table next to us. And the woman leaned over and said, "You don't remember who I am, do you?" And it was Martha Putman
Yeah.
and Bounce Jones.
Bounce. Yeah. She married Bounce Jones.
And so when you mentioned Mr. Putman, it made me think. Now, I believe she told me her sister, Anna Ruth, who was in my class, had died.
Yeah, I think that's right, yes.
I can't remember now who she married, but
Vance.
Vance.
Yeah.
Robert
Vance.
Robert Vance, yeah. Okay. You mentioned those drawings. Davenport's store had something I'd always given, I thought then, my right arm to be able to play with, but my mother wouldn't let me. And you remember they had a shoe department on the south wall of that building, I believe in the ground floor, and they had a rail and a track and a ladder that rolled along, and you could climb up to the
Yeah, I remember
ceiling
that,
to
yeah.
pick shoes out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd have given anything to play with that ladder. But I have seen a few other places, but I guess that's the only one in Hardin. Now, over at Pace's store, you you had this big rope-pulled elevator, didn't you?
Yeah, sort of a freight elevator, but you pull the rope like
Mhm.
drawing water to go up and down.
Mm-hmm. Now, both those stores sold nearly everything.
Yeah, they had a lot of hardware over at Pace's.
At one time, I believe
Miss Kello had a hat shop at Davenport's upstairs for the ladies.
Uh-huh. Yes, I don't know who started that, but now a woman by the name of Miss Eva Gardner, who was Rudy's wife, later his widow, told me that she came to Hardin and took that job
Hmm.
as a milliner.
Yeah.
And of course they did some pretty big things back then. They'd drive, I guess they went on the train. They'd go to New York to buying trips and pick out the latest things, and they bought materials, and I started to say they made hats, but I guess the proper word would be they trimmed them, sort of.
Plumed them.
Yeah, when some years ostrich feathers would be in style, and
Yeah.
some years they weren't, and they'd put veils on it for big singing and Tater Day and so forth. Oh,
Big singing day used to, you pick strawberries and got enough money to go get you some ice cream and a bottle of pop. They always come right together about it.
yeah, that's right. Who was the basketball coach when you were playing, Tom?
Carl Johnson.
Now, hasn't Carl come back to Hardin?
Yeah, he was there in the yard one day last week. We passed by there. He was out in the yard.
I believe he went away to Peoria, Illinois, and worked in chemicals,
Yeah, worked for Caterpillar, I think.
Caterpillar maybe, you know. And now he's back home again.
We
What-
saw his sister, Agnes, to ham breakfast at Hardin the other morning. She was from Florida. Her and her daughter was up visiting.
And
thing-
she married Winters K. Jeffrey, didn't
Yeah,
she?
that's right.
I remember him. And now let's see. He had a sister named Julia,
Greenfield.
married a Greenfield. Yeah.
Scott Greenfield.
Are they still living in
No,
Florida?
she is, but Scott was dead, she said, deceased.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of those names come back to you when somebody starts naming a few of them. Most of the time, I don't really sit down and think about it. I can remember some great times we had at school. The year I was a senior, I guess it must have been the class of 41, though, that was juniors. So your brother John was in it, and we put on a junior-senior banquet, built a outdoor scene. We went out in somebody's woods, I don't know how many different woods, and brought in dogwood trees and made a mess. I remember that. But it was pretty,
Yeah, I don't remember that offhand.
and we'd lay that out and cut all kinds of wildflowers. You know, we could do everything but spend money.
Yeah. Wasn't any money to spend, was it?
Didn't have any money to spend, but we did. We managed to do several things. One thing I always wanted to do that we never did make, at least while I was there, and that's put out a yearbook.
Yeah.
We just,
Well, one year there, I think it's about our junior year, they made up for the yearbook and the guy run off with the money. We didn't get one.
mm-hmm. That may have been the first one they ever had, because in the class 40 we didn't have a yearbook. And I believe that in 41 they planned one, and maybe, as you say, it didn't really come to pass because of a charlatan in the woods somewhere.
There's the 42 class ring.
You've worn that almost smooth, Tom.
I wore it out and had it redone.
Uh-huh.
But you can't see that. Yeah, I wore it every day since I got it.
Uh-huh. Now, tell me about your working life. We're about to run out of time here.
Well, I got out of school in 42 and went to the Army in October in 42 and got out in 45. Went to GI plow school, they called it,
Yeah.
for 4 years. And after that run out, well, went to work in tap and stove factory and worked there 30 years.
And retired from that.
Retired from that.
Well, tell me about your wife.
I married Ruth Hicks. She was J.K. and Orl E. Hicks's daughter, and she was in the same class I was at school in 42.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, where do you live now, Tom?
We live in Alamo Heights now.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're on that, I call it old 641, but I guess it's got a number.
It's 1824 now.
Yeah.
I'm the mayor there at Alamo Heights.
You, you know, they embarrass me around school here, and half the people call me mayor of Hardin. Well, if the real mayor knew it, he wouldn't like it at all. That's just an expression that people use. And have you got a garden?
No garden. We couldn't get anybody with a tractor to break it, and the rotator played out, and so we just quit gardening. Got 2 goats and put out there.
Let them mow the yard.
Let them do
All right, now, I believe Ruth's family, did they move to Hardin with a TVA group?
They come in 40 or 41, 40.
I thought I remembered
TVA,
that.
yeah.
I remember her dad.
There's one of the few that come and stayed. Most of the others moved on, but they stayed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a Rogers girl there at school that came.
Yeah, Dean Gay.
Uh-huh. Now, Dean Gay married one of them. There was her sister was taller. Now, I don't
Christine.
know what happened to her.
She married a Glover, married Bill Glover's brother. Can't think of his given name.
Yeah.
They went to Michigan, I think.
Yeah. Tom, have you got any real funny stories you could tell?
Well, no. I don't think of any right now. I could tell offhanded.
Your mother sent me out one time and said, I want you to get a homegrown banana. And we went out, you and I and maybe Mildred and Margaret, I don't remember for sure, but we picked pawpaws.
Yeah, pawpaws. they did resemble an banana a whole lot, only they had seeds in them.
Well, I had never heard a whole lot about pawpaws then, but in 1940 when we won the regional speech tournament, went to Lexington for debate finals and other contests, the University of Kentucky organized a play night for us the first night we were there. And they played a game and sang a song called Way Down Yonder in the Pawpaw Patch. Have you ever heard that?
No. Well, by the way, we don't forget Wadesboro Spring. That was a busy place. I remember that well back in the 30s. People come there and haul water in barrels and got home and didn't have a half a barrel of water and drove up and everybody jumped off the wagon and got a drink out of the spring and watered their mules and so forth. And people washed there. They drug up every limb 4 miles out for people to wash where the water was.
Mm-hmm.
Clothes hanging everywhere in the bushes.
That was one of the few springs that didn't go dry.
No, it never did weaken, I don't reckon.
Mm-hmm. Kept pouring out. Did you ever go to Peggy Ann and swim?
Yeah, sure did. Yeah, that was a good spring there, too.
What'd that cost us?
Oh, a quarter, I think, if you had a quarter.
Or a dime?
Yeah, Mr. Redden, he'd chip the ice off that in the winter and put it in that place back in the ground there in sawdust and cool his drinks in the summer with it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that well.
A frugal man. Well, Tom, let's see. Well, I guess we're going to have to stop. We just got one more minute. Unless you have some special tale to tell.
I don't reckon I have anything special.
You never did. Tell me about learning to drive the Model T that Mr. Lawrence bought for me. He gave me a calf and $15.
Well, it was so opposite that others, when you mashed in on the clutch, it went. And now you went down the road. And to stop it, you had to hit neutral, and you had to learn how the feel of it to get that.
You and John drove that all over Marshall and Callaway County.
Yeah, you get 5 gallons of gas for $1 at Ivan Jones's if you had the dollar.
Well, thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure interviewing Tom Padgett. And he now lives on the edge of Callaway County, but spent much of his time, was born in Hardin, I guess, and went to school there throughout his school career. I'm Ray Mofield, and this has been Oral History for today.